Yet another commentary on the teaching company course. I want to keep on top of these because they just keep coming out with them. I want to be able to refute everything that I find fallacious, troublesome, or weak arguments. In this case, an excerpt from the lecture on Paul the Apostle out of the series of History of the Bible. This is Dr. Bart D. Ehrman once again, and here's one of the things he says. Jesus was an itinerant preacher from a small backwards part of the empire, from a little town that nobody had ever heard of, Nazareth, who got in trouble with the law, got crucified by the Romans. He was a crucified criminal. To call Jesus the Messiah simply did not make sense to most Jews in the first century. Okay, well, right off the bat, he's characterizing Jesus as if that was the only thing people knew about him. Oh, he was just a criminal. Nobody knew anything about him other than that. I mean, that's actually how out of context he wants to present Jesus in order to make his argument. I don't think I have to say anything. I don't really have to comment on that. I mean, how far from reality is that to assume that the only thing anybody ever knew about Jesus at the time was he was a criminal that was crucified? That's the way he's presenting it. I'm not making this up. This is I just read it to you. All right. Then he goes on, right, he was saying that, okay, it wouldn't make sense to first century Jews. Then he says, Christians, though, insisted that Jesus was the Messiah. Well, there's something wrong with that. He can't interject Christians at this point. As if, he's doing that anachronistically. The Christians were not, well, let's put it this way, the followers of Jesus at the beginning were not called Christians. It was quite a few years later. So at this point, to say that it was Christians that came up with all this information is bizarre. It was Jews. It was Jews. It was always, it was Jews all along up until, it took, the next century before there was a real rift between, say, Gentile believers and Jewish believers in Jesus. So this is another inaccuracy, just to all of a sudden switch to what Christians were doing. But anyway, let me finish his thought here. It says, Christians, though, insisted Jesus was the Messiah. It says, well, how could he be if he wasn't a figure of grandeur and power? According to the Christians, the Messiah had first to suffer, and then he would rule in power. And he says the way they came to understand Jesus as the Messiah was by reading the Jewish scriptures and finding passages, especially passages like Isaiah 53 and Psalms 22, that talk about one of God's righteous ones suffering for the sins of others. These passages, however, which continue to be quoted by Christians today, never refer to the Messiah. I mean, how can he just come off and say that? He has no right to say they never refer to the Messiah. First of all, he's using this dichotomy, Christian versus Jews, that didn't exist at the time. I reminded of the passage that says God will not let his Holy One see corruption. Well, why would that be significant if he didn't die first? I mean, somebody who wasn't going to die, you wouldn't expect the idea of whether or not he's going to see corruption to enter into the discussion. So it wouldn't have been a far out idea for Jews to interpret this kind of life and death of the Messiah. It's not that far out like he's trying to present it. The other thing that's problematic about this is he's suggesting that that's where the believers in Jesus, the early believers in Jesus, got the idea. They read it in the scriptures. They didn't get it from Jesus' actual life. I mean, that's the way he's presenting this. But they actually saw this happen. When Jesus came and did his miracles and died and rose again, he confirmed the scriptures. It did help them understand what the scriptures meant, but they didn't get the ideas directly from the scriptures. It was the other way around. He said he's thinking, oh, They're going to read the scriptures and say, maybe we can say this happened to the Messiah, as if it didn't, as if they didn't know anything about Jesus. This is really, I think, something that needs to be discussed before you. If you're going to buy this course, I think you should be warned to, listen and think about what I'm saying in light of what Ehrman's going to present to you. I'm going to read some more from Ehrman. He says, to give a sense of the emotional response that most Jews had to the claim Jesus is the Messiah, consider this analogy. Imagine being told David Koresh, the guy at Waco who got killed with the Branch Davidians, is the Lord of the universe. Of course he's not the Lord of the universe. He was a crook, criminal, probably sexual offender, and he gathered arms and he was violent. But the kind of reaction we might have to someone saying David Koresh is the Lord of the universe is the reaction most Jews had to claim Jesus was the Messiah. And it was probably the reaction of Paul the Apostle. So you got to laugh. You got to laugh at that. Jesus did not have that kind of a reputation when he was here. Yes, he ate with sinners. He had dinner with sinners and publicans and so forth. But those were acts of mercy. They weren't acts of some kind of crook or sexual offender or anything like that. Like, he's trying to make that connection. You wouldn't make that connection unless the only thing you knew about Jesus at the time was he was crucified by the Romans. And I suppose maybe there were a few uninformed people, but you remember the account of Jesus and the road to Emmaus with the disciples. They said, you didn't, because they didn't recognize Jesus, and they were saying, you must be the only one around here that hasn't heard these things. So he's actually contradicting the information we have already in terms of how and what was known about Jesus. So there's another contradiction that he's or another piece of information he's deliberately overlooking. I got to say he's deliberately doing this at this point, because somebody who spends their life teaching about the New Testament couldn't be that unaware of the passages and what was actually going on in history. Okay, now Ehrman goes on to say what converted Paul. He says Paul indicates that he had a vision of the resurrected Jesus. Jesus actually appeared to him as living, even though Paul knew that he was dead. I don't know where he gets that from. And then he goes on to say, this vision of Jesus after his death, Paul interpreted as evidence that Jesus had been raised by God from the dead. But if God raised Jesus from the dead, that must mean that Jesus is not cursed by God, but instead he is blessed by God. Well, it goes back once again to the passage I was citing about God will not let his Holy One see corruption. Paul, being a Pharisee who studied, well read in the Scriptures, would know that passage, and I don't think he'd have a too difficult time making that connection. But Ehrman's main point here is that Paul was reading backwards. He was reasoning backwards to figure out who Jesus was. There might have been a little bit of that in terms of Paul, because Paul had convinced himself previously that Jesus couldn't be the Messiah. But after his experience, he was realizing his errors. He wasn't making things up. And I would also like to finally cite the whole idea of the Lamb of God. John the Baptist was Jewish, and he identified Jesus as the Lamb of God. That speaks to this whole idea that there was going to be a substitutionary atonement. I don't think that that's such a foreign idea the way Ehrman is trying to present it. My understanding is in ancient Jewish commentary, Isaiah 53 and Psalms 22 were considered messianic. I know that today they're trying to say that's not the case. You can't go back and rewrite history. I think the evidence is there. Unfortunately, I haven't done the actual research to cite reference material, but something to look into, certainly. I hope you appreciate this warning.